People can't get their heads around the fact that you don't have individual money and that, you can get on with like 8 people. If you can get through living in a confined space with a lot of other people in quite sort of intense situation, you can more or less get through anything.
All right, welcome to Polishing Turds with Nick and Cal. My name is Nick.
And I'm Cal.
And this is the show where we take a deep dive into the wonderful world of bad music. Okay, folks, welcome to part 1 of our Chumbawamba series. And yes, I promise that we will actually be talking about Chumbawamba for real this time.
All right.
That's what everyone's excited about, right?
I know. I have to pretend because I love talking about anarcho-punk, and now I have to talk. I mean, they're an anarcho-punk band, but
well, yeah, they definitely were and are, and the whole time that we're going to be talking about Chumbawamba, we're going to see them make music that's very hardcore and edgy, like we heard in our last episode. We're going to hear them make music that's very poppy. We're going to see all kinds of different left field directions in between, but the whole time when they were nobody, they were anarchists. When they were famous, they were anarchists. When they went back to being nobodies, they were anarchists.
Yeah, then they were musical anarchists the whole time. Yeah. No rules. We make what we want.
Yeah, and it's a form of anarchy that is very pure, I think, and qualitatively a little bit different than what we kind of explored in our last episode. And of course, as you guys remember, that last episode we focused most of our attention on the band Crass. And part of that, quite honestly, as Cal more or less admitted, was because we both love Crass and we wanted an excuse to tell their story. But also really is important to understand the history of Crass and their aesthetic and that whole scene they created, because I think without that, you can't really get an understanding of who Chumbawamba is, how they formed, how they presented themselves, and that's especially true in the beginning. So that's mostly what we're going to be talking about in this episode, is how Chumbawamba formed themselves as an anarcho-punk band and what that looked like initially. Now, of course, Chumbawamba were one of the many bands directly inspired by Crass, and on the surface, the two groups share several similarities. Both bands have 8 members, more or less, 2 of which are female vocalists. Both of them lived collectively in abandoned squat houses. It's apparently an easy thing to do in Britain during the 80s. And most importantly, both were extremely committed anarchists who sought to use their music as an instrument of social change. But Chumbawamba's approach to musical anarchism was radically different. Whereas Crass dressed in all black, pumped out atonal noise, and seemed devoid of humor, Chumbawamba learned how to temper their radicalism with a cheeky irreverence and pop sensibility. They saw no contradiction between being anarchists and having fun. Indeed, to me, their whole aesthetic identity seems to be an expression of the freedom implied by their politics. Does that make sense, Cal?
Yeah, that's how anarchy should be.
Yeah, it's like the end goal of this system beyond burn it all down, and throw bricks at cops, which is cool. I'm not dissing any of that shit, but the end game is to build a world where we're happy and free and can rely on each other in total trust and can just explore whatever the fuck we want to do, whether it's, painting or, free lovemaking or making stupid ass podcasts about bands nobody cares about.
No, by nature, if you're like a really serious anarchist, you're kind of a contradiction. That doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, because you're serious about the injustice of the world, but you also want a world that's a lot better and where you and presumably everybody else is going to be happier. And sometimes people who get lost in utopian politics kind of forget about that last part. Is like, you want to be able to show what's this going to look like at the end of the revolution.
What do we want? Disorganization. How do we get there? Organization. Oh shit.
Yes, that is the beautiful irony of all this. And Chumbawamba, I think, expressed this beautifully. Their live shows were silly and theatrical, their musical choices bold and playful. They spent a lot of time playing pranks on the outside world, some of which we'll discuss in this episode and others. And even the band's name is a kind of monument to absurdity. I mean, Chumbawamba. What?
I've wondered my whole life what this means, and I'm hoping you can tell me.
Do you have a guess? I'm throwing this out not just to Cal, but like literally everybody in the audience. Like take like 3 seconds and try to conjure your best guess as to what Chumbawamba means.
I genuinely picture just like a Bigfoot type creature name.
They all like secretly developed some cult religion and worshipped a Yeti god called Chumbawamba.
That is the Chumbawamba.
That's a good guess. I kind of like that one. But if you guys guessed nothing, you'd be correct.
It's just nonsense words.
It's a nonsense word.
Fucking anarchists.
Well, so when they were coming up with the name, like they came out of this scene where you had a lot of bands like Conflict and Icons of Filth and The Mob, so like all these like very aggressive, like militaristic names. And they wanted one that was just silly and just fun.
Dumb, yeah.
And that would just kind of stand out amongst these like, anarcho squatter punks.
It worked.
Yeah, it did. And then of course, like, impossibly, this band with a name that is impossible to spell or remember gets famous 15 years later, and they have all these press people asking them what Chumbawamba means. And so they kind of played this game on the press where every time they were asked that, they would give a different explanation.
Oh, like the Joker explaining how he got his scars.
Yeah. Like one of them came up with a story of like he had a dream where he went to a bathroom stall in some alternate reality, and the men were called Chumbas and the women were called Wambas. There's another story they told where they were in France and they saw like an African drum circle, and the drummers were like chanting Chumbawamba, Chumbawamba.
Wow.
Like just like shit like that. They kind of ran wild with it.
Chumbawamba is a state of mind. It's the feeling you get after a big shit. I don't know. A big wank.
Go to the loo. Oh, that was real Chumbawamba. You see, unlike most bands, Chumbawamba were never content to be boxed in by the genre's increasingly rigid conventions. Rather, they seemed to take a glib delight in challenging their own audience as much as they challenged society. They took a ton of stylistic risks, some of which, frankly, did not pay off. And while I can't say I like all of Chumbawamba's music, I absolutely respect the spirit behind it.
So they're like a more like wild King Gizzard.
Yeah, that's not a terrible analogy. Like, not quite as musically prolific or talented as King Gizzard, like, but like definitely in the realm of like they do their own thing, mm-hmm. and have their own kind of musical language. Like, yeah, that makes sense. And I've gotten into a lot of Chumbawamba's music I really do like, and I like definitely for a band that is more or less a one-hit wonder, there's really a lot to explore with this band that nobody's ever going to find out about.
Yeah, I'd always heard that, and I never believed it. And that's, I think, why I was excited to do this series.
Oh, yeah, they definitely fit that category of, like, not nearly appreciated enough. And yet, kind of throughout their whole existence, like, people just never seemed to get them. Like, critics always hated them. They were slagging them off before and after Tub Thumping, and to some extent during. A lot of punks kind of turned on them at various points. Like, they just never really fit in anywhere they tried to be. They were too, radical and intellectual for the pop world. They were too poppy for the punk world.
Mm-hmm.
So, they were constant misfits, and that seemed to suit them really well. So it's another reason why I really like figures like that, whether it's in art or history or even sports, let alone music. I love misfits.
They're the modern fullback.
Yeah, they're John Kuhn. All right. So suffice it to say, Chumbawamba had a long and fascinating career well before Tub Thumping came out, and I am very excited to tell their story. But before we do, let's acknowledge our sources. And the most important text for this episode and the next couple of episodes is going to be a memoir by Chumbawamba guitarist Boff Wally. It is called Footnote. That book was written a couple of years after Tub Thumping came out, and basically just tells the story of everything they did up to that point and kind of how they reacted to fame. I like this book because you can tell Boff Wally actually wrote it. It's not...
he wouldn't have it any other way.
Absolutely not. There's no way these motherfuckers are getting a ghostwriter.
Right.
He has this very, kind of flippant attitude toward everything, and he's very... that classic dry British wit, but he's also, but yet also very playful. And you can definitely see the connection between his writing style and the spirit of the music he writes. So I think it is probably my second favorite book that I've ever read for this podcast. Number one, of course, being Violent J's Behind the Paint.
You tell me it wasn't one of those Billy Ray books?
Actually, there were two Billy Ray books. There was the one that he quote unquote wrote himself. He definitely didn't write. And then there was the one that was the book written by the girl that he banged.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
That it wasn't great literature, but it was a lot
of tea in there.
It was a lot of tea, and it was really had that voice of just like a bitter, jilted lover.
Billy Ray, that man has a micro penis. I'm not supposed to put in the book, but I am.
It really was like that kind of feel. I don't know how many copies of those books ever got printed, but I feel like I have one of 8 in circulation. Also, another book we mentioned in our last episode, but Ian Glasper's The Day the Country Died, the anthology of anarcho-punk bands. He has a chapter on Chumbawamba, which I'm sure irked a few hardline anarcho-punk fans. But that chapter was really good. Also want to shout out a 2012 article in Jacobin by Aaron Lake Smith. This is more about the politics of Chumbawamba, as well as a documentary produced by Ben Unwin called "Well Done, Now Sod Off," and that's a really good introduction to Chumbawamba if anyone wants to go on YouTube and watch that. And finally, I should say that this is going to be like a 3 or 4 episode series, but lest you think that we're overdoing it, that it's too much Chumba, I should note that there's a podcast out there called Chumbology, which chronicles the entire history of Chumbawamba, album by album, song by song, with each song taking up an entire hour-long episode.
How is that possible?
Can
you imagine pitching that to your buddy? You do it like if I'd come to you and said, "Nick, let's do a podcast. What's it about?" Chumbawamba. Just that.
It's okay. Hey, who were they again? They did who let the they did the I Get Knocked Down song. Yes, we're gonna talk about them for 107 episodes. There is one caveat here, which is that I've only listened to 3 or 4 episodes of this show, and unfortunately they spend a lot of time just kind of going off on random shit.
Oh, I hate that. We never do that.
Yeah. No, we mean even
out of most of the podcast.
We'll do it shit. At most 10 to 15 minutes per episode in our worst episodes. They do it for 50 to 60% of the episodes.
No, I hate that when you turn on a podcast and it's not what it claims to be about most of the time.
I know it is a major kind of drag, but otherwise just credit to them for just trying to bring Chumbawamba out to the masses, which is a Sisyphean task. All right, with that out of the way, let's meet the Chumbas. So this first section, I wanted to start out by just kind of introducing most of the key members of this sprawling 8-piece band. And hopefully by doing so, it's going to make the rest of the narrative seem a little bit less confusing. And before I get into that, let me confuse things a bit further by noting that for each artist, I'm going to list like their primary instrument, but this band, they kind of shared a lot of duties.
Sure.
Sometimes one guy would play guitar and then another guy would play keyboards and they'd switch back and forth. So
that's insane. They could do that with a song as musically challenging as tub thumping.
Yeah. So maybe another similarity they have with King Gizzard, but again, musically, it's not going to be as overwhelming. All right, so first we have the aforementioned guitarist Boff Wally. This is the guy who wrote a book, and because he was the only member, as far as I can tell, of Chumbawamba to write a book, most of this narrative is going to be seen from his perspective, but that's fine by me because he's a good writer, he's a funny guy, seems like a decent bloke all around. He grew up in a Mormon family.
They have Mormons in the UK?
They got Mormons everywhere on Earth. They send people, all over the world
What
to
the
their
fuck?
fucking missions.
Dude, we're sending them out like crabs or something.
Sorry,
UK. I thought that was our problem.
I mean, it's more our problem, but like they're in Russia, they're in fucking Uganda.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, we watched a whole musical about them doing their mission.
I mean, it's not like there's tons of them, but like they do exist out there. But like, think of being a Mormon in the United States. Like, if you're in Utah, that's no problem. Like that's like
it's expected.
That's the majoritarian culture. Other Western states, you'll probably have a pretty significant community. But even like as far out here as Wisconsin, like you're going to be pretty isolated. It's got to be an order of magnitude bigger than that in England.
That's insane to me. I guess I don't know why I just assumed they weren't anywhere else. I don't know why.
No,
I can't picture a British Mormon.
Yeah, you just like no one else can be this dumb, right? No, but what happened is he grew up in kind of a poor working class family, and his dad left when he was like 3. So his mother was struggling hard with poverty, and like just in
that's
the middle,
how they get you.
Exactly, in the middle of her lowest moment, some missionary comes knocking on her door, and suddenly she's found faith, she's found purpose, and he goes on to describe just the shit that if Mormon culture, the shit about going to an elder when you're like a preteen and getting the talk about how you're not supposed to masturbate, shit like that. And then of course, like he grows up, he's got a naturally curious, rebellious mind. And then punk rock happens, when he's a teenager. He says that he saw the Sex Pistols on TV the first time they performed in 1976, and it just completely just enraptured him. He said he felt like Paul on the road to Damascus.
All right, so he found his Book of Mormon.
Yes.
And it's not what his mom wanted, but whatever.
Yeah, so he found so he starts to lose his faith, not necessarily because of Johnny Rotten, but around the same time, and I can relate to that too. But yeah, so then he discovers punk rock, and then he discovers anarchist philosophy. It starts to like kind of give meaning to a lot of these latent feelings of rebellion that he's kind of sensed all of his life. So that kind of explains how he ends up in a punk rock band. But as far as like his like deeper musical philosophy goes, he spends a lot of time talking about how when he was a kid, he would go to pubs in Northern England and people would just sing songs like, not like Sweet Caroline, not songs.
No, they would sing things like, I get knocked down.
But just like songs that like weren't even on the radio. Songs that like they'd been singing since like 1872 or whatever.
This is a Europe thing I'm vaguely aware of through like movies.
Oh yeah,
they have like bar songs and like soccer chants and like weird shit I don't know about.
Exactly, like we don't really have an equivalent for that here in America. But...
No, if you start doing that here, people would, shut the fuck up,
quiet the fuck down. So, but that's like, but hearing those people come together and sing these songs, like I think that kind of informed his idea of what music is supposed to be like. And I think that goes a long way to explaining how he could write a song like Tub Thumping, as well as a lot of the other kinds of songs that you're going to hear in this series. All right, so the next person we have is vocalist Lou Watts. Lou Watts is the woman that you hear singing "Oh, Danny Boy" in the Tub Thumping song. She's a singer that I think just has a honest-to-God pretty voice, which she uses a lot, and I think really they use her very well in this band, and I think it really helps to set Chumbawamba apart. So along with Boff Wally, she was with Chumbawamba basically from the beginning to the end. And interestingly, she was also in a relationship with Boff for 7 years early on. And eventually they broke up, and Lou started dating Harry Hamer, who is the drummer in Chumbawamba.
Oh, no.
And keep in mind, Cal, that these guys were all living together in one house.
Oh, man.
When this shit happened.
He's a stronger man than me. I don't think I'd keep living in the house if I had to hear my girlfriend of 7 years start banging someone else. I'd have a tough time with that.
It's odd, but part of this story is how well they just manage all the weird emotional shit that just comes from sharing each other's space.
They're a true commune in all senses of the word.
Yeah, like they lived out their ideals, and it's absolutely incredible to me.
That's some Fleetwood Mac shit right there.
Yeah, like this is like the functional Fleetwood Mac. It's like, because they didn't have cocaine to help them deal with that shit. They had to actually just look inside themselves and face it and just carry on. All right, next up we have vocalist Danbert Norbacon.
That's an amazing, incredible name.
Fun fact, his birth name is Nigel.
Nigel Norbacon is also pretty cool.
I feel like he was born Nigel Norbacon, and he thought to himself at some point in his life, like, how could I sound even more English? What about Danbert?
Danbert Norbacon.
You will live the rest of your life. Anyone that's hearing me right now, you will just walk around the rest of your life and never meet a single other human being named Danbert, unless you're psychotic enough to name your child Danbert, in which case you need to.
I feel like I missed an opportunity with my boy.
How do you think your wife would have responded if he's like, let's call our son Danbert Dennison? Actually, that's got a kind of a ring to it, don't you think?
Danbert Dennison.
Yeah,
no, we fucked up.
So Danbert was also one of the OGs of Chumbawamba. He is a particularly rambunctious fellow. He would often strip naked during live performances. One time in 1996, he appeared nude during the middle of a Smashing Pumpkins set, which was being broadcast live on German television.
I'm surprised they gave that much of a shit, to be honest.
So this resulted in Chumbawamba being banned from ever appearing on German TV again. Danbert is also the guy who assaulted a British politician during the time that Chumbawamba was famous, but we will get to that in a later episode. Next up, we have another vocalist, Dunstan Bruce. So Dunstan is the guy that you see fronting the band in the Tub Thumping video. So
is he the drinks a whiskey drink guy?
Yes. So he sings, he drinks a whiskey drink, he does a vodka drink. So this is, for most people who are new to Chumbawamba, they'd probably assume that Dunstan is the lead vocalist of Chumbawamba, but that's actually not true. For the vast majority of this band's career, he was a backup vocalist / percussion player. So why is he in the Tub Thumping video? Well, around that time, he just kind of wanted a more prominent role in the band's live performances.
I'm sick of playing the tambourine.
Yeah, so he just asked, hey, can I do lead on more songs? And they were like, sure.
That's all you got. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Sometimes all you gotta do is ask.
They're anarchists. They share everything. They share romantic partners. Yep. They share money. They share musical duties. And they were like, yeah, sure. No one's bigger than anyone else in this band. So, so they let him sing lead on the song that turned out to be the #1 smash hit single. And I gotta, like, this has to be like the best example of perfect timing in the history of music.
No kidding.
All right, next up we have Harry Hamer, the drummer, the one who I mentioned dated Lou Watts for a time. He was Chumbawamba's drummer from the early 80s until about 2005. I don't really have much to say about him, except he's a great drummer, and I just wanted to shout that out.
Harry Hamer, good at drums. I buy it.
And then, that name sounds like a drummer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, if you had to guess, like, what instrument does a guy named Harry Hamer play?
Drums.
Yeah.
Honestly, this band has, like, the best named people
of
all time.
And speaking of which, my favorite name... besides second favorite name besides Dan Burton or Bacon, in this band is the other backup vocalist Alice Nutter.
Alice Nutter.
So Alice, like, she's a bad bitch. She is really one of the most hardline, edgy people in Chumbawamba.
She actually is a proper nutter.
She is. She's a bit
that type of name. I feel like you have to be.
You know, she actually named herself after an historical figure, this woman in the 1600s who was put on trial for witchcraft and hanged. She named herself after that person who was, I think, from the same town in Lancashire that she was from.
And that person's last name was Nutter?
Her name was Alice Nutter. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like a witch to me.
Can you imagine if, like, you get hanged for some bullshit reason like that? Your last thought is like, as the life is being choked out of you, is just how horrible and unfair this all is. And, like, never would you once think to yourself that, like, 350 years later, someone is going to honor my life by taking my name in a silly drinking song that gets shown all over the world. But yeah, so Alice Nutter, she gives zero fucks, even by Chumbawamba standards. She was very outspoken, and a lot of times this would kind of get her in trouble. For example, in 1998, she appeared on the talk show Politically Incorrect with Bill Maher, and she said that if fans were too poor to afford Chumbawamba's CD, then they should go ahead and steal it from a major record chain.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'd say fine by me.
Yeah.
But this, as you can imagine, really pissed off the people at Chumbawamba's label. And it even led to some stores selling the Chumbawamba CD behind the counter like it's fucking Sudafed or something.
Right.
It's like, hey, you got that Chumbawamba? Here it is. Put it in a little brown paper bag for you.
It's like how they sell like a Hennessy behind the counter only. It's like it's not even that expensive compared to the like whiskey and shit they have out on the shelves.
Is it worth stealing? And then lastly, we have Mavis Dillon and Jude Abbott. These are both trumpet players. Mavis left before Jude joined. And I just wanted to shout them out because, Chumbawamba are kind of unique in playing trumpet in a punk band and not being a ska band.
I was just going to say, I was like,
besides NoFX, I can't think of any other punk band that does that. So, but it really does go a long way to kind of distinguish Chumbawamba's music, and they use it pretty well. All right. So with that out of the way, let's get into the early history of this band. The story of Chumbawamba begins in the small northern English city of Burnley. Here in this working class, post-industrial town, a college dropout named Boff Wally, his real name is Alan, by the way, but Boff is another name that like only the English could possibly come up with.
Yep.
This band is so fucking English. I love it. They're adorable. So Boff Wally, he formed a band called Chimp Eats Banana with his friends Dan Burt and Midge.
All right, it's not as bad as Creed's first iteration being Naked Child, but it's close. I don't think I'd get excited to see a band called Chimp Eats Banana.
I tried to look up their demo tapes. I eventually found them, but I had to type into the YouTube search bar Chimp Eats Banana. Do you know how many videos I had to sift through of actual chimps eating bananas? But surprise, surprise, none of the boys in Chimp Eats Banana had any musical training. What? But due to one wacky misunderstanding, this band was accidentally booked for a live show before they had even rehearsed once.
I love this story because, like, any sane person, if this happened, would just be like, whoa, I don't even have a song written.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it.
Yeah, like, this is like, they should have backed out in embarrassment. Instead, they just changed their whole careers and the entire course of their lives. So what happened is this. They had this friend named Simon Lanzon, who was kind of like a big figure in the Burnley musical scene. He managed the only punk band in the town, and like ran a venue and did a bunch of other things like that. And he decided that he was going to form a musicians collective in Burnley, the Burnley Musicians Collective. So Boff, Dan, and Midge, they're friends with this guy, and they attend the inaugural meeting of the Burnley Musicians Collective, basically as like moral support. And then toward the end of the meeting, Simon passed around a piece of paper asking, okay, everybody who's in a band, write down the name of your band here. He starts passing around the paper. Paper gets to Boff, Dan, and Midge, and they're, like, oh, let's form a band. What should we call ourselves? How about Chimp Eats Banana? Yeah. Write down Chimp Eats Banana. So they write down Chimp Eats Banana. They think nothing of it. Go home. Watch football games, do their thing. And then about a week later, one of them gets a phone call from Simon saying, okay, I got you a gig. So now, like, Chimp Eats Banana was less of a thing, like, than even Hugh Gray Dumpo was, our fake band back in the day.
That's like, I'm trying to think of like an equivalent. Like, you say something really fucking stupid while you're drunk, and then someone actually takes you up on it like 2 days later. You're the guy who said he can like jump a car on a motorcycle or like something. I don't know.
Or it's like you're at a bar and you're like, you know what? I should fucking run for governor. God damn it. You wake up with a hangover the next morning and like the legislature is at your door. It's like, all right, what's your agenda? But no, like, so, but instead of like, meekly apologizing to Simon, they decide that, okay, we might as well just write some songs and try to be a band. So they start playing this show, and then that leads to a few others, and like they're never any good. They're like basically making a joke of it the entire time. They would do like silly things like there was one set where they dressed in pajamas and sang a bunch of songs about sleeping, and they actually had a guy in a bed on stage who slept through, who would fake sleep through the entire performance. But like they were just having fun. They were kids in their like late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, you can still get away with this shit back then. When you're that young, I mean.
Yeah. Fun fact. There was at one point in history a Chumbawamba cover band called Chimp Eats Banana. They were based out of Milwaukee.
All right.
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
You know that it is our rule. Like, we are legally obligated to shoehorn in Wisconsin at every available opportunity.
That's all we got.
I'm impressed that anyone else, even in the state, even gives a shit about Chumbawamba. I thought we were the only ones. So let's hear a song by Chimp Eats Banana. This is called I Don't Like Girls.
I don't like girls. I don't like beer. I don't like bikes. Just like swimming. I don't like dogs. I don't like money. But when it's sunny, I go for a swim. Socks up.
At this point, I'm supposed to take all my clothes off, but you won't be able to see me.
Socks up.
Anyway, I'm gonna have to go swimming anyway, so I'm gonna tell you what we do.
Up.
Don't kill the doctor. You see, we all work. Well, that's if you could call post working.
Up.
Get up early and go out for a swim. Anyway, I'm a chef.
Vest up.
And, all the other day, I set grill on fire, you see.
Pants up.
Well, it's really funny. In fact, it's ironic, because I want to be a fireman,
Drums
but my
up.
chest isn't big enough, and I had to put it out. So you could call it practice for when I use
Specs
it.
up.
Then I put me trunks on and run into the sea, and all the girls are looking at me. But I don't like girls.
I don't like girls. I don't like bushels. I don't like bikes.
I didn't hate that.
No, you get an idea of how seriously these guys take themselves. Like,
Yeah, no, that had the fun vibe of kids fucking around.
yeah, and like it's humor that's like a little bit smarter than it initially appears, and that's going to be a running theme throughout this band's history.
That's my favorite kind of humor.
Yeah,
You
for sure.
say something that sounds dumb, but you had to be clever to think of it.
Yes. And all very, very British. So eventually, the members of Chimp Eats Banana moved to the nearby larger city of Leeds and decided to take their project a little more seriously. By this point, they had met vocalists Lou Watts and Alice Nutter, both of whom would join in on this new project that they eventually wound up naming Chumbawamba.
Much better name.
Yeah. It's just I wonder if it's like all right, Boff, I'll join your band, but can we really move past Chimp Eats Banana? Like literally anything else. Anything, eh? So, like Crass, again, Chumbawamba kept picking up members as they went along, seemingly unable to turn anyone down. And one story I found particularly amusing was the story of how they met eventual percussionist / backup vocalist / I get knocked down guy, Dunstan Bruce. So what happened is this. One day, Boff was walking around in Leeds where he saw this flyer on some kind of post or wall. The flyer read, quote, "Bassist and drummer wanted. Influences, The Fall, Richard Bonneau, Fire Engines, Wire, Kellogg's Cornflakes, Monochrome Set, Crossroads, Coronation Street, The Velvet Underground, House Party." Now, you just heard a bunch of names, Cal. I imagine that some of them might be familiar to you,
Yep.
Others not so much.
Yep.
But I'm going to do you and our audience a service by kind of listing out what all of these influences are. And I'm going to refer to page 72 of Boff Wally's book. So he writes, "The Fall were a shambling Manchester band with a genius lead singer who looked like crap."
Okay.
Have you heard The Fall, Cal?
Nope.
Oh my God. That is absolutely true. He is a genius lead singer who looked like crap. His name was Marky Smith. The Fall are one of my favorite bands of all time. I gotta make this a side project to get you into The Fall. They're weird. They take a little getting used to.
I'm used to weird.
But they're a very fun post-punk band and like a huge presence in like Manchester, the kind of northern English area where these guys were from. So they were like almost like hometown heroes to these guys. So that was The Fall. Richie Bonneau, a guy I did not know. Richie Bonneau was a strange and iconic bloke who commented on the cricket during test matches.
Okay, so it was like he's listing like an announcer among his favorite.
Yep.
All right.
Next we have the Fire Engines. The Fire Engines, quote, "were a scratchy, dynamic pop band who refused to play live for longer than 15 minutes, figuring that's the length of time it takes for people to get bored." And I think that's an interesting and sound philosophy.
I think they were ahead of their time.
Yes, very much so.
Because nowadays, I would say it's about 5 to 10 minutes.
5 to 10 minutes. We're, judging by TikTok, like less than 1 minute.
30 seconds. That's all you get.
In the future, all sets will be 1 minute long. Wire, Boff writes, were similar but better. They unashamedly introduced art into punk.
Oh yeah, we know Wire.
Yeah, we mentioned them in our last episode. Wire is fucking awesome. I love that band. Kellogg's Cornflakes was my staple diet at the time.
I was going to say, I was really, really hoping he was just talking about actual cornflakes.
There's no twist. He's talking about the cereal Kellogg's Cornflakes.
I get that, though.
Which I'm sure has inspired and influenced a lot of great punk bands.
Yep, that's me with instant ramen.
Yeah. The Monochrome Set were a pop band with an enigmatic singer and bass player who used to be in Adam and the Ants when they sang songs about bondage and S&M. Their guitarist was called Lester Square. Don't know anything about Monochrome Set, otherwise I'd have a joke there. Crossroads and Coronation Street were soap operas which had been on television since 1896, many years before television was invented.
Okay.
So, I don't know. So soap operas, they're influenced by old British housewife soap operas.
Okay.
And this next influence, I imagine most of you guys know, it's the Velvet Underground. I don't have to explain what they're all about. The last one was House Party. Boff writes, House Party was a daytime TV show, the plot being that 6 or 7 elderly ladies sat around a pine table in a country kitchen, drinking cups of tea and discussing whatever came into their heads.
Jesus Christ.
So basically just like the View for old British ladies in the 20th century. So yeah, I mean, naturally, if you are an aspiring musician, you know, in your early 20s walking around Leeds, you see a poster like that and you think to yourself, I gotta meet the visionary behind that flyer.
Yeah.
And so Boff calls this guy up. He meets Dunstan. You know, of course, the ad was for a bassist and a drummer. Boff plays neither bass nor drums. He admits this to Dunstan. Dunstan basically just says, I don't care.
Let's hang out. You answered the flyer.
I knew eventually somebody'd respond. So like Dunstan became friends with him and he just ended up joining Chumbawamba.
That's so funny, dude. That's like if you find like a number in a bathroom stall and you call it and you do actually have a great time.
Yeah,
just, like,
and then you
takes
get married
out fishing or something.
I know. It's kind of beautiful. Like, just I wonder how many other people responded. Like, just if anybody, I imagine Boff was probably the only one, or maybe there was some other guy who thought, here's an insane person that could rope into a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
All right. So gradually, Chumbawamba amasses their octet of members, and they start to actually put out real music. And the earliest Chumbawamba releases were basically just demos on homemade cassettes with titles like History Luddite, Be Happy Despite It All, and Another Year of the Same Old Shit, which still resonates today.
Yeah.
All those titles. But the first professionally recorded track these guys had the chance to make was actually part of an elaborate prank.
All right. Early affinity for that.
This is going to be another running theme with Chumbawamba. So, the year was 1982, and in the UK, Oi music was all the rage. Now, we talked a bit about this in our last episode, but basically, Oi was a subgenre of punk aimed at working class kids that eventually got co-opted by racist idiots.
As is tradition.
Yeah. And, you know, I feel like maybe I was a little bit unfair to Oi in our last episode. Like, the kind of history of how it got mixed up with, like, white nationalist groups is kind of very complex and definitely beyond the scope of this series. But needless to say that a lot of Oi bands were really pissed off by this, really tried to move against it, and the early spirit of Oi was not, like, fascistic at all.
Yep. I mean, that's how it usually goes.
Yeah. Hashtag not all Ois, not all skinheads. But nevertheless, the guys in Chumbawamba, like Crass, thought Oi was stupid, and they managed to troll the entire scene in brilliant fashion. What they did was they created a fake Oi band called Skin Disease and sent a demo tape to Gary Bushell, who was a prominent journalist and a major promoter of Oi music at the time. And Gary apparently liked the demo enough to invite the band down to London to record a song for an upcoming Oi compilation EP. And they really went all in on this. Like, they shaved their heads, they dressed in, like, studded leather jackets and wore Doc Marten boots and like, oh, where's the studio, mate? They're performing as a band called Skin Disease, and they recorded a song called I'm Thick.
This is for Gary Bushell.
All right, I gotta ask, if you're a guy and you hear that, what part of you goes like, "That's the shit"?
Oh, I'm thick too.
Yeah,
it's for me. That's amazing. The fact that no one caught on that was a joke.
Oh god, I feel like you could do that now though with in America with country.
Yeah, so
we could
I
write...
don't like reading.
Yeah. I feel like whatever we think is the most heinous, ridiculous fake country music.
Have a music called Books Are for Queers.
Yeah.
You will shoot to the top of the country charts. Okay, someone needs to try this. Someone that has more free time than we do. Please pretend to be a country band. Write a song called Books Are for Queers and tell us how many Republican state senators want to meet you. All right. And in case you're wondering, the whole song literally is just Dan Burt shouting, "I'm thick," 64 times.
Oh, that's awesome.
But even though they had plenty of time for pranks, Chumbawamba were also slowly starting to become more of a real band. In 1982, they scored a victory for their punk credentials when one of their demo tracks appeared on the Crass Records compilation Bullshit Detector Volume 2. So Cal, we talked a bit about this in our last episode. Do you remember what Bullshit Detector was and what that was all about?
Yeah, so different bands would just send their demo to Crass, and they just put it all on these compilations with almost no oversight at all.
Yeah,
and
pretty
let people
much.
Decide, then people just decide if it was good or not.
So yeah, it's like, okay, are these really just three random teenagers with a Maxell tape? Check. Do they hate the government? Check. Do any of them, wear polo shirts? No. Check.
Nope.
All right. on
on.
you go. So this is the song that appeared on Bullshit Detector Volume 2. It is called 3 Years Later.
1, 2, 3 years later, complacency sets in. He patiently sits in, watching the telly.
What's the tale of it?
Thursday to Thursday, Radio Times Day.
Local news agents, no.
Damn. All right.
Yeah.
That's the first time I have been officially surprised on this series.
Yeah.
I actually loved that, but I get why that wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea.
No, but it actually is a good distillation of like what a lot of early Chumbawamba songs were like. You had that intro that was like this slow vocal harmonization, and that is a technique that they really learned to master, throughout the course of their career. And then it's very somber. It's about someone who's lived off of unemployment for 3 years, basically. And then it kind of like devolves into this like kind of like pseudo crass riff.
I just like how uncanny it all sounded, though.
Yeah.
That was like a horror movie in music form.
Yeah, and the cassette tape vibe really kind of aids in the feel of all that. Like that kind of muddy lo-fi sound kind of definitely resonates and jives with the kind of tone that they wanted to create. So Chumbawamba, like, they can make you feel really happy when they want to, or they can write a song like that that's a lot darker and more serious. And in the beginning, you see a lot more of that like somber, heavy, angry stuff. One interesting thing I read in Ian Glasper's book, The Day the Country Died, was after they were included in this compilation, they were really excited about it, obviously. It's a big honor in that world to have Crass, the great ones, pay attention to your shitty band in the north of England. But Boff also writes that he sent letters to all the other bands that were on the album, and he was basically like trying to encourage them to like go off, do your own thing, but try not to be just Crass ripoffs. Essentially,
that went over great.
He said that nobody wrote him back.
Yeah, Do our own thing. That's not what anarchists do.
Who's this fucking poser? Mommy, send this letter back. Yeah, so but that's again an early indication that even though that part of that last song did sound like Crass, they're definitely thinking outside that box. All right, so for this next section of the episode, Cal, I want to start off by asking you, before you had your own family, what is the most amount of people you've ever lived with at one time?
5. And I hated it. I lasted 3 months.
Yeah.
And I felt like Chumbawamba must have felt. Like I had a attic room with no windows.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally, because I was the last one to join, and I just got the shittiest room, and I spent literally no time in that fucking room. I hated it.
How'd you get on with your housemates?
Yeah, I did all right. The problem is I went back to college late.
Yeah.
And they were all seniors, and they were in full frat boy party mode. Yeah, and I had been working for a few years, and I was just kind of beyond that. I did not fit in with those guys.
This is like the first time in your life where you were starting to take shit seriously.
Yeah,
and they're doing the opposite.
Well, and I was there during the summer, and I was doing summer credits, and they had nothing to do.
Yeah. Oh God.
So yeah, that was not a great 3 months for me.
Yeah, sound travels up. That's not a good scene. At one point in my life, I was living in a what we called a cluster dorm back when I went to college, and there were 8 people in that cluster with 4 rooms of 2 apiece, but 8 people all together. And
you can't even get privacy to take a shit in that setup.
No, it was I don't know why we thought it was going to be a good idea. It's we hang with our bros, and it was fun initially, but very quickly it kind of devolved into madness. We basically kind of formed factions where but two guys joined a frat right away and left, so that was nice. But then the other 6 of us, it kind of got split between the 3 of us that like to smoke weed and do drugs, and 3 other guys who were just into drinking and being loud 24/7. So I'd be in my room tripping on mushrooms or some shit, and then the other guys would be in the dorm next door going just on their 14th Rainier going free falling.
Oh God.
It sucked, and every time I've lived with more than one other person, it's been pretty terrible. But you can see where I'm going with this. Imagine living with 8 to 9 people, when you're making basically no money.
That's what I was going to say. Add in that you're poor as fuck.
Yeah, and what little you make or are able to steal or scam off of welfare, it's all going into a pot. You're all sharing it.
I couldn't do it. I feel like within a week, I would be so-and-so, you're not carrying your fucking weight around here. I'd be I don't know. I'm not cut out for that kind of thing.
Well, again, to me, the most amazing thing about Chumbawamba was that they managed to make this work and actually kind of thrive off of it for a long, long time. So, yeah. So Chumbawamba in the early 80s took another cue from Crass by collectively moving into a dilapidated Victorian squat house. This domicile was an old mansion called Southview, which once belonged to a wealthy factory owner in Leeds, but had since fallen into disrepair. Today, they would refurbish that into an Airbnb.
Right. No, I know, because if you just leave it, it's fucking haunted shit.
Yeah.
Old rich guy mansion that he abandoned. That I've seen enough horror movies to know.
Exactly. In this case, the horror was mostly glue sniffers, starting trash fires in the middle of the living room. This is kind of the scene they described before they got there. It was some just glue sniffing wastoid punk guys.
Sure.
And then a couple of the guys were these organic vegetable hippies. One guy that they said ate only avocados to the point where his stools were green.
Oh God.
that kind of guy. You already can picture what this guy looks like. How long his fucking matty brown hair was.
Fucking emaciated.
Yeah. So that's the kind of scene in which these guys are living, the people they're associating themselves with around this time in the early 80s. But they made Southview their home, and it would be their home and their base until like basically the early 90s. And like obviously this place is a complete piece of shit, would not have passed any like housing code that Britain or any other country had at the time. They had mold issues, like a lot of shaky support beams, like
child corpses in the basement.
It's like, this is the one that just looked too unsightly, so we dug it in the pit.
Let me give you the tour. This is the child burning oven in the basement.
So there were 9 people living here at the peak. And then like in addition to like playing and recording music down there, they also set up a printing press in the basement where they would make anarchist literature. They're
making it even more haunted than it was.
I know. Just imagine, like, this is like this house is from like the 1910s. It probably came with a printing press. Like it's just the whole thing is so like weird and anachronistic. And so like obviously like to make ends meet, they grew some of their own food. They shoplifted. They dumpster dived. They collected unemployment. Sometimes they'd take a job as a dishwasher or like a warehouse guy or whatever. But Boff writes that the practical aspects of living together in this house, like the sharing the money, cooking food, repairing the windowsills and shit, like that was the easy part. Mm-hmm. The hard part was dealing with each other's emotions.
Yeah, I bet. I could see that.
Yeah.
Dude, it's stressful being broke.
Yeah.
And you've got 8 broke-ass people in there fucking each other. Like, it's going to get really emotional really fast.
And they're all in their early 20s, which is a time for anybody. You're still basically figuring yourselves out.
Yeah.
Your emotions are a lot stronger. You don't have a lot of tools to like deal with your own shit. A lot of these guys came from homes where it wasn't necessarily ideal.
Yep.
They're British anyway, so they don't have a very open, warm like culture. So like they're dealing with all this shit, and just there's no place to like kind of go off, and everything they deal with they have to deal with in front of everybody else. Mm-hmm. So how do they make this work? Well, it really came down to one thing, and that was meetings. They had a fuck ton of meetings. Boff writes that meetings were the heart of Chumbawamba during this period.
I kind of picture these going like constant interventions.
Yeah.
One member is fucking up, and instead of you confronting them and creating drama, like
all
you
right,
do it by committee.
No, like literally, that's kind of how it went. Like,
we all think that this is hurting the group, and then it's easier to take that blow or accept that maybe they're telling you something you need to hear.
Dunstan, you need to stop wearing that bloody deodorant that smells like pond tar.
With the constant farts.
Like shit like that. And like they would use meetings to decide like, what food they were going to cook, how they were going to spend their money, like how to get this derelict old truck off the front lawn. But that was what made the whole thing work, was that they would have these hour-long meetings where they talked everything out. And the decisions they made, they said that it wasn't like they would vote and it would be like 5-3 in favor of something. Like they had to form a consensus.
Oh God. Constant compromise. This sounds like my personal hell.
Your personal hell is basically what the heart of anarchist theory prescribes for. This is what is going to happen when the police are gone and the military's gone, and all the CEOs drop dead. Like this is how we're supposed to organize ourselves.
I guess I'm a cold, hard, authoritarian capitalist at the end of the day. I like my life a lot more than this.
I know, like I kind of get that, honestly, and like this honestly is my stumbling block with how like socialist and like left-wing anarchist theory is supposed to work. Like I get it. We're liberated. We are more in charge of our own destiny, but we're also more responsible for it. And like just for a person with my personality who just really does just want to be left alone, there's something marginally less shitty about being told what to do, even by guys like Trump.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
I think there's a ton of humans like that. You know how many people I that I've worked with through my whole career that have literally said, I just want to show up, do my drawings, go home.
yeah. Oh, totally. Totally.
Tell me what to do every step of the way. And I respect that. The world needs that person. Lots of that person.
But it can't have only that person. We really do need people who help us like break down our own inner walls.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need people to like try to help us bring our feelings out into the open and make connections with other people. Like we can't, like, no man is an island. I really believe that. I'm speaking to what my own personal temperament is, and
Right.
like how I could never fucking do this shit. Even if I knew it would lead to a number 1 hit single 15 years later, I still wouldn't sign up for it.
10 years of suffering is not worth tub thumping.
Exactly. Now, again, it bears repeating that all of this was very similar to the sort of lifestyle that Crass had pioneered years earlier. You know, they had tons of meetings too, and some of them probably loved it, some of them were bored out of their minds. But while Chumbawamba clearly admired and to some extent modeled themselves on Crass, they also sought to differentiate themselves from their heroes. And this is where it kind of gets interesting, because from the way that Boff Wally writes about Crass, it's clear that he really admires their philosophy, their live show. He just recounts being awestruck by how they presented themselves live, but he didn't like the music. He thought it was, quote, uncompromisingly tuneless. It wasn't for him.
That's fair.
Yeah, and that is fair. I understand why 9 out of 10 normal people would have that reaction. But he also like kind of saw that whereas Crass kind of embodied this middle class London-esque approach to anarchism, like, you know, they like a lot of these guys were, if not university educated, then from middle class backgrounds where like they were more into the literature side of it, you know, than anything else. Whereas the guys in Chumbawamba, they're from the north of England, which is like, in England, like their north is kind of like our south in a way. It's
they're sheep fuckers up there.
I mean, that's a reductive way of putting it, but it's like, you know, the northern part is London is the center of England. It's where all the great jobs go. It's where all the anyone with any get up and go moves to London to have a career. And the people in the north, it's this, it was, you know, during the industrial age, it was the heart of, you know, the English economy. But then, you know, obviously what happened to all of the industrial West in the 20th century, it just rotted out and fell into disrepair. And so in a sense, maybe it's like more like the South meets the Rust Belt.
Sure.
You know, where it's just like this neglected part of the country. And so the guys in Chumbawamba come from this very like working class background, and they don't really identify with the kinds of things that Crass is representing in the way that it's being presented. Yeah,
it's like how You or Me is not gonna write some dedication of the boroughs of New York, or like,
it's
just not our
exactly.
world.
Yeah, no, like we present ourselves as like Wisconsinites because that's what we are, and we talk about normal shit, and we don't try to sound any more pretentious than we kind of are. You know, and we like drinking beer and watching football, and that's exactly the same with these guys. They like drinking beer and watching that weird version of football where they actually kick it around, and it doesn't.
They use their feet.
Yeah, and it's just totally boring, but you know they like that. He says that we could have sold ourselves as a northern Crass apart from our inconsistency, love of football, ignorance, drunkenness, class politics, sense of our own ridiculousness, ability to throw a good party, lack of restraint, contradictions, and northern accents.
It's like they're describing us and our friends.
Yeah, pretty much. So that's essentially what how Chumbawamba sees themselves. Like, they're definitely anarchists. They're definitely against the system.
They're just fun anarchists.
But they're going to do it in their own fun way that incorporates like humor and, you know, more perhaps accommodating to like real people in the real world. All right. So one of the difficulties of doing a series like this is that because Chumbawamba are such a highly political band and everything they're talking about or responding to happened decades ago in another country, you kind of need a lot of context in order to tell this story well. And context is one of those words that, I love it. And 90% of people I know like roll their eyes when they hear, wait till you hear the context.
Yeah.
It's like, no, fuck off, get to the point.
Here's 2 paragraphs to explain the sentence I'm about to say.
I love watching YouTube videos that spend an hour to get to like whatever the thumbnail title was about.
Yeah.
Because he's explaining. I love that shit. But most people have, lives, and I get why most people don't like that. But I'm going to give you guys the context, but try to keep it to a minimum. All right. And I will admit off the bat that I'm not an expert in British politics or history. I don't want to bore you guys too much, but I do want to focus on this one particular event, an event that had a big impact on Chumbawamba's career, and that was the UK miners' strike of 1984.
Riveting.
Boy, I knew you were excited, Cal. Like when I said, hey, maybe we should do Chumbawamba next. Like you were like, boy, Nick, I can't wait to hear about Margaret Thatcher, the Falklands War, and the miners' strike of 1984. Let's fucking do it. That's what our audience needs.
Somewhere, we do have some UK fans, and one Mark Corrigan somewhere is going, yes!
I bet a lot of our UK fans don't even know what the fuck we're talking about. I wouldn't blame them. This shit's like from forever ago. But I will implore all of you guys to just remember one thing, that every event we're going to talk about, every political controversy, every, bill that landed on Thatcher's desk, it all leads to tub thumping.
You got to watch them get knocked down so they can get up again over and over. If
you just see a guy getting back up again, like it's not fun, but you got to see how he got knocked down to appreciate the strength that allowed him to get back up again. All right. So the UK miners' strike of 1984, this was a major labor dispute that happened in the mid 80s. And the Cliff Notes version of it goes like this. So I'm sure you know, Cal, that historically, coal mining was a major industry in Great Britain, especially in the northern regions where Chumbawamba are from.
Of course.
It basically like built the country and to some extent the Industrial Revolution. But by the early 80s, the output of Britain's mines had diminished considerably, with many collieries operating at a loss. This, of course, in addition to the fact that nuclear energy is a thing by this time. They had discovered oil off the shore of Scotland, so the mines just aren't doing too well. The UK coal industry had been nationalized since 1947, so essentially the government was paying money to keep a lot of these unproductive coal mines afloat. So when Margaret Thatcher and the Conservatives took power, they were determined to kind of cut the government's losses and close down as many uneconomic mine pits as they could. So, I mean, on paper, like from a purely economic budget perspective, you can see why this makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like closing an unproductive branch of your company or something.
Yeah. But the problem is, for these coal mining regions, those pits were all they had. Like, in a lot of these towns, a lot of these communities, a lot of these regions, the coal mining facility was the thing that powered their entire town. Like, if the pit gets closed, like everyone's out of a job. We
have this now in West Virginia.
Oh yeah, like that. This is basically like Northern Britain being turned into West Virginia, and they know that. They know that that's what they're facing. So these mining unions are going to fight really, really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. And Margaret Thatcher, from minute one, was not a fan of unions of any kind. So she was just like spoiling for a fight with them. And she got one in the form of this dispute. So in March of 1984, the UK Coal Board announced plans for a new wave of pit closures. In response, the National Union of Mine Workers began walking out, although crucially, not all mine workers joined the strike. Normally, for like a strike of this magnitude, they have like a national vote. they didn't this time for reasons that are like super complex. But basically, like some mine pits, like everybody struck, everybody walked out. And in some parts of the country, not that many people joined the strike. So it's a very complicated dynamic. But
I gotta ask, if your mine is not profitable and they're saying we're gonna come shut you down, and you say I'm not gonna work, how is that effective? Like what are you striking? They're gonna say, oh, you solved my problem. Good, mine's closed.
I mean, they still. Well, the problem is Britain needs coal. Like they still need like coal to like they still needed enough coal to power their country.
Better places to.
So like, let's say you have like, I'm going to pull some numbers out of my ass. Like, let's say you have like 150 coal mines in Britain. You want to shut down 30 of them, but the entire union says fuck you to that. We're going to close all 150 so that you don't close down those 30. That's basically more or less what happened here.
All right, I follow you.
But the problem was it didn't work because the government kind of saw this coming, so they started stockpiling coal, knowing that if the miners pulled that threat, they could just draw off of this reserve of coal that they'd been building up, and that was one of the many reasons why this whole thing didn't work. Mm-hmm. Other reasons were, the press was totally on Thatcher's side the whole time. The police were obviously on Thatcher's side the whole time. You had a lot of demonstrations where the police brutally cracked down on unionists that were picketing. It was just a very ugly moment. And the strike lasted like about a year before the miners just completely caved. It was a crushing defeat for the union. And it's kind of remembered as this watershed moment in British labor history, this kind of moment where this union solidarity was completely broken up, and which kind of helped facilitate this kind of slide towards neoliberalism and privatization and the kind of capitalist hellscape that we all now live in.
Right.
Like, this is a major reason why that process was accelerated in Britain at the time. So again, while I actually understand why they wanted to close these mines from just a national budget perspective, the way that they went about and the people that they hurt and the kind of ideas that it represented, like I totally sympathize with the unions and the miners on this.
Yeah, that one's always a tough one. There's no right answer to stuff like that.
It is very complicated. But like the way that it kind of broke down in society at the time was like, the left was really on the side of the miners. And there was a lot of grassroots groups that came out to support the miners. Actually, interestingly, a lot of like LGBT groups at the time came out and organized to help the miners.
Unlikely allies.
It was very, very weird, unlikely allies. But they used their activist prowess to kind of help these people out. And it's all very like just heartbreaking, but also kind of touching story.
Sure, yeah.
The way it all played out. But okay, so how does a miners' strike play into this story about Chumbawamba? Well, as I just mentioned, during the strike, a great many left-wing activists joined forces to show solidarity with the miners or to raise funds for their families. This included a lot of punks and other radicals. In fact, the very last Crass concert ever was a benefit for the striking miners.
Nice.
And Chumbawamba, of course, were no different. Despite having almost zero money, they themselves set up a support group for striking miners and completely threw themselves in for the cause. Day after day, the members of Chumbawamba showed up at picket lines, printed leaflets in their basement, and, of course, expressed their solidarity through music.
Smiles for the cameras as the miners return. They say no one has lost and no one has gained, but wiser and stronger the people have changed, and it won't be the same in the village again.
12 months of bribery, 12 months of lies, cops in the village to truncheon your pride.
miners in our country, instead of doing this, they get mad about welfare. Like, that's the problem.
Yeah. I know, like they're listening to Kid Rock instead of this shit. That illustrates kind of another big strain in Chumbawamba's music, is that they are very much connected to the tradition of English folk music.
Yeah, that's straight up, I'm sure there's differences, but to my un-English folk ear, it sounds like the Edmund Fitzgerald song. Like, really close.
Oh, for sure. So the subject of that song, the song was called Fitzwilliam, and Fitzwilliam was one of the mining pit villages that was striking around this time. It's just south of Leeds. And at one point, there was a demonstration in Fitzwilliam where protesters clashed with police. It got, pretty out of hand. 29 people were arrested and 9 were convicted of, quote, public order offenses. I don't know what the fuck that means, but
I'm sure it's their version of disorderly conduct.
Yeah,
whatever we want to get you on.
It just means like we need an excuse to arrest you, basically. But within the village of Fitzwilliam, there was a lot of sympathy for folks. These folks, they ended up being named the Fitzwilliam Nine. So it's just one of those classic tales of like, brave protesters demonstrating their solidarity in the face of the oppressive police force. Tale as old as time. Yeah, so this song appeared on some sort of miners' benefit compilation. And so obviously, like Chumbawamba, they're playing music. They're raising funds for these groups because a lot of these miners, like the union had some funds to support their members, during the strike, but that money quickly ran out and they depended on private donations to like literally feed their families. Like they're like, even though like to us, it's just like, okay, well, this mine pit's kind of a waste of taxpayer money. Just shut it down, forget it. Like to somebody in a small village in Leeds, like they don't got a lot. They don't have education. They come from 3 generations of miners, and also like the corner shop and the bakery are all supported by the mine village. They're gonna go belly up if this thing gets closed down too. Like you can just understand on an emotional level, like why they would get so invested in trying to protect what they have.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's what Chumbawamba was getting behind, is just like trying to support these people and appeal to the humanity of the nation. So what I find really interesting is not only were they like using their music, but they're also like actually like going to union bars around this time, spending time with the miners, like just not picketing with them by day, but hanging out with them by night. A couple of these guys even played in a theater group doing Christmas plays for the children of miners. So they're just like deeply involved with this shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more activists than band at this point.
Yeah, they are. Like it really is like kind of blurring the lines between a political project and a band. And as we already told you, the UK miners' strike ended in a defeat for the miners, but the experience of it still marked a turning point for Chumbawamba. You see, prior to this strike, the members of this band were primarily influenced by this sort of bubble of anarcho-punk culture, a scene that, according to Boff Wally, had become, quote, suffocating and blinkered. And you kind of alluded to this in our last episode, Cal. You talked about how no rules eventually becomes our rules.
Yep. It's the curse of any group of humans getting together.
Yeah.
99 times out of 100, that's how it ends.
Yeah. Like they just had this culture of, like if you eat meat, you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
If you don't wear the same clothes that I wear, like
if I can't get as drunk as I want, anarchy's not for me.
Yeah.
That's literally should be one of the rules, is you are allowed to drink. To me.
Yeah, like the fucking crass, like they're policing themselves, like, oh, I can't even go out to a Chinese restaurant.
Like yeah, what's the point of anarchy if you can't do anything?
Yeah, it's like, and I understand the spirit of it. It's like you least common denominator, like if you really want to make your whole identity about empathy for the suffering, then you have to bring yourself down to the most suffering guy, which is like literally what Jesus did when he washed the feet of like the poor and the wretched. But notice the irony.
Yeah.
Who did I just allude to, and who do they hate the most? Like, so, but yeah, like I think like the guys in Chumbawamba start to see through a lot of that shit, you know? So what I believe happened was, and they don't kind of say this outright, you know, they allude to it, but I think reading between the lines, it's very, very clear. During the miners' strike, Chumbawamba had left the insular punk community and were hanging out with real families dealing with real struggles. They saw unemployed fathers and desperate mothers continue to laugh and joke with each other even when they didn't know when their next meal would come from. I think that the level of sheer humanity that they were exposed to day after day put a lot of the silly pretenses of punk politics into perspective. Now, Chumbawamba's ideology didn't necessarily change, but they stopped giving a shit about how credible they looked in the eyes of punk purists. They understood that the world was bigger than that, and they wanted to spread their message to everyone, not just spiky-haired squatters. It's like one of the things they talk about, like Chumbawamba, they're all vegetarians, like they don't eat meat, but they stop pushing shit like that in each other's, in everybody else's faces.
I don't think it's mentioned.
Yeah, like because like they're hanging out with these miners, like, you know, like obviously these guys are eating shepherd's pie, but are they going to give them shit for that when they're like fighting to keep their families, you know, afloat? Like, no. So this is...
I wish a couple of our, like, you know, our internet warrior Twitter society would realize and do some of this shit.
I swear to God, Cal, like if the modern American left had even 10% of the insight that Chumbawamba was able to figure out in the mid 80s, like we could accomplish so much more shit.
I know, I hate the purity test on the left side of things.
Abso-fucking-lutely. So, in 1985, armed with this fresh perspective, Chumbawamba self-released their debut single, Revolution. Now this 7-inch, which is really more of a suite of songs, is a heartfelt, urgent polemic that feels like an attempt to distill the entirety of Chumbawamba's philosophy onto one 9-minute disc. Let's hear a sample.
There's always been a pattern, a struggle and defeat. Never that cycle, incomplete. Never enough to tip the scales. Too many people rotting in jails or blooded on the battlefields. The history books from every age have the same words written on every page, always starting with revolution, always ending with capitulation, always silenced by the truncheon or bought out with concession.
Always repetition, 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 repetition,
Definitely getting a lot better at their instruments.
Yeah, for sure. See, particularly Harry. I told you he was a good drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is actually a really good piece of music, and I think that sample that we played is kind of not a great representation. I mean, it's because it's very like progressive, and they have a lot of different parts throughout the EP, but it's just a really good release by them. And the sad thing is, like, this particular thing was never re-released in any form. They pressed a few thousand copies of it, so it's pretty rare. And yet somehow I was able to find a copy on Discogs for $35.
Well, it's like you said, we're one of like 20 people still thinking about Chumbawamba.
I know, but like even still, like I feel like Chumbawamba weren't total like non-entities. Like,
sure.
I feel like there should be more of a demand than that, but who the fuck knows? Also, like, I mean, just as good as that shit was, some punks around, you know, in the 80s were giving them shit because they put that out on vinyl and not cassette.
The fancy.
That's
why I'm convinced cassettes will make a comeback someday.
I think they already are, kind of, aren't they? Like,
a little bit. You can find them now in record stores and stuff.
Oh, for sure. Like, and there's a lot of like, particularly like experimental artists that like only put out stuff on cassette.
Yeah.
And it's actually the one format I don't have any kind of in my house. Like, I need to like buy an older car just to be able to put a tape deck in it.
You'd be actually surprised how expensive a cassette deck is. Because there's only like 2 companies left that even make them.
That's a shame because, like, Violent J was like shoplifting them or jacking them by the dozens back in the 80s. Maybe that's why they're so expensive, because he's still hoarding them all. The Revolution single is an impassioned plea to recognize history, understand oppression, and fight for change. But within that plea is a warning that we can't do it alone, that the myopic purity culture of punk rock wasn't going to cut it. Here's a quote. "We're kept apart by philosophies and moral stances and policies. We'll be stuck in our own little ghettos forever until we start to work together."
You hear that, modern liberals?
Fuck yeah. Put that in a fucking tweet. Now, according to Boff, lyrics such as these were, quote, "an acknowledgement to ourselves that we desperately wanted to move away from the post-punk ghetto that we could see was already stagnating. A scene so obsessed with its do-it-yourself ethos that it was beginning to disappear up its own unwashed drainpipe trouser leg."
That's a fun way to put it.
Yeah, I love that little quote. And he's totally fucking right. Like punk was just like kind of sniffing its own farts, essentially. It was just like every in-group eventually develops its own language. And when you're only responding to each other, like you kind of forget how outside people are going to respond to what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's the echo chamber effect.
So like, you might truly believe in revolution. You might truly want to smash the system and build a utopia of your own, but like, you can't really do that if the only language you have to express it is through like like years of discourse and fucking fanzines and references to like some like obscure single that someone put out 10 years ago. And indeed, in the years that followed, Chumbawamba would begin to move away from the confines of punk rock without retreating one single inch from their revolutionary politics. These first bold steps set Chumbawamba on a journey which eventually, unexpectedly, led them to pop stardom. And that journey will be the subject of our next episode in Chumbawamba Part 2.
Yay!
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening, but please don't hit the pause button just yet. I've got a little treat for you at the end of this episode. Obviously, please share us on social media. We are polishing.podcast on Instagram. We are polishing_turds on Twitter, I think. I don't know. I barely check that account anymore. If you want to email us polishingturdspodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from people. We respond to every email we get because I have no life. But the most important thing I want to talk about in this last little coda is there's something, Cal, that frankly I think is long overdue. And that is to give a shout out to a great personal friend of mine and one of the great unsung musical heroes of our generation. Like Chumbawamba were unsung musical heroes in the 80s and 90s. This guy is, I think, one of the great unsung heroes of today, and that is a guy named Patrick Tabor, aka Tabor Mountain. Now, some of you may know that Patrick does the intro music for this show, that little 30-second ditty you hear at the beginning. But I always hate introducing him that way because it's like saying, like, I really love Robert De Niro. Here's a Doritos commercial that he was in.
Yeah.
like if you judge him, as much as I love that little intro music, it is not even close to hinting at the musical career that he's had. He's been involved with a great many projects and just written many, many great songs. But his big solo project is called Tabor Mountain, and Tabor Mountain just released a brand new LP. It's called Twilight Apologies, and it is just absolutely fantastic. So, Cal, with your permission, I would like to kind of end this by playing one of Patrick's songs from his new album.
Oh, fuck yeah. Let's do it.
This is called Already Dead.
Show me the shape of the life you left behind. A fatal waste of the flaw in your design. An envelope would mail itself and reach your tongue. Come on and send me something soon while we're still young. Oh, she's the lonely one. Never sleeps at night. Twilight apologies. Ain't gonna make it alright. No, you can't put me, 'cause I'm already dead. I see some things that you wouldn't believe, but they're better left unsaid. No, you can't put me, 'cause I'm already dead. I sent a message that I know you received, but I just got left on red. A hazy image of your truck in hot pursuit. How could we know that there was still so much to lose? She's the lonely one. Never sleeps at night. Twilight apologies. Ain't gonna make it alright. No, you can't put me, 'cause I'm already dead. I've seen some things that you wouldn't believe, but they're better left unsaid. No, you can't put me, 'cause I'm already dead. I sent a message that I know you received, but I just got left on red. She's the lonely one. Never sleeps at night. She got ungodly strong. You better run for your life. No, you can't put me, 'cause I'm already dead. I've seen some things that you wouldn't believe, but they're better left unsaid. No, you can't put me, 'cause I'm already dead. I sent a message that I know you received, but I just got left on red. No, you can't put me, 'cause I'm already dead. I've seen some things that you wouldn't believe, but they're better left unsaid. No, you can't put me, 'cause I'm already dead. I sent a message that I know you received, but I just got left on red.
All right, that was Tabor Mountain with Already Dead here on WKOK Madison. All right, no, but seriously, check out the album Twilight Apologies. It's available on Bandcamp. Definitely get yourself a copy. The whole thing is great from start to finish. All right, anything else to add, Cal?
I got nothing. I'm starving.
Good. All right. I'm going to keep you from your family as long as possible. All right, rock over London, rock on Madison. Chalmers Jewelers, when you want to show just how you feel.